How does a social network plan to make money off of mobile? Well, joining me now to talk about this is David Eastman. He's the JWT CEO of the North American division of JWT. Also with us is Majid Abraham. He's the Comscore president and CEO. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Majid, let me start with you because I want to break down the numbers because you were watching that segment earlier that Corey was talking about and how the users are, that momentum is slowing down, and you've got your own data on that.
Sure. I think that while the Facebook has achieved tremendous increase in the number of users of the internet population, but what we see today is that many of those same users on the PC are actually using mobile devices. And while the usage on the PC tends to be about 6.5 hours a month, on a mobile device is 7.5 hours a month. So they're actually longer, it's more intense, and for a large degree, it's incremental usage. So it represents an incremental monetization opportunity for Facebook. You just basically check your feeds and all of that more often during the day than you do it on a PC.
And are they new users, a large part of them?
I don't think in the West they are necessarily new users, but I think what you're going to see is in the developing world where the primary mode of access will end up being a smartphone, there will be plenty of new users.
So David, from an advertising point of view, how does an advertiser capture that then?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question and one that's been asked about mobile devices probably for the last 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
And the first thing you need to remember is that the real estate on a mobile screen is much smaller. So the type of message that you can deliver needs to be sort of looked at in a different way. So I think it's not going to be the same sort of advertising that we would see even on the PC site or on any other type of channel. So it's quite difficult to say exactly what it'll look like.
Well, that's the question, right? What will it look like, or is it too early right now?
I think there'll be a lot of experimentation. I think brands are going to will probably need to get in early to experiment. Not everybody will get it right first time. But I think we'll see lots of different ways of using that screen, whether we'll be going away from the site to look at other things and then coming back to Facebook. But on the, I mean, it's probably the most downloaded app now, I think, Facebook. And for a lot of people, it is an operating system online. I've heard it referred to as the new Windows. So I think that people will spend a lot of their time actually on Facebook and navigating away and coming back. And obviously data is also photography. I think images are going to play a huge part in that. So I can see brands thinking about how do we use imagery, how do we capture people's attention by using photography rather than text.
Right.
I think there'll be a lot of experimentation over the next 18 months.
Majid, in the data that you're collecting and what you're seeing, the patterns, are people using Facebook, outside of just, moving on to mobile, but are people using Facebook differently than they were, let's say, 5 years ago?
Sure. I mean, Facebook has evolved quite a bit. They have introduced a lot of new features that they didn't have before, and the nature of the user has changed. 5 years ago, it used to be college students and very young audiences, and now you have even grandmothers that are very intensive users of Facebook. So yes, the usage has changed quite a bit. The news feeds are much more extensive now. And I think the news feed and embedding sponsored stories, which is one of the things that Facebook sells to try to amplify when fans like a brand, are things that lend themselves to advertising on a mobile device.
Right, I saw you nodding your head, David.
Yeah, they're trying to weave their brand story into the feed as opposed to making it something that is elsewhere. And obviously on a mobile device, it needs to be in the feed because there's nowhere else for it to be.
You don't have the space to put on the left-hand side or the right-hand side some ads and then the content on the left-hand side.
Right.
You have to basically insert it within. The other opportunity that I think is a huge opportunity for everything mobile, and certainly it's a big opportunity for Facebook, given that it has the #1 duration spent on mobile, is local. Facebook knows about you, knows where you are, knows about where your friends are, and there is, I think, a tremendous opportunity to be able to marry your taste and your location and create some very superior
for advertisers to target their advertising then, right?
Correct.
Based
Correct.
on that local
Correct.
data.
Correct.
And how, I mean, that's important for advertisers, obviously, but that seems to be the wave of the future.
I think it is. I think that this, the idea of near-field communications as well, basically utilizing the technology that is in the device, and Facebook really piggybacking on that to a degree, I think will open up a lot of other areas for brands and advertisers that don't already exist. I also think, and one of the things that hasn't been talked about much today, or over the last few days, is will Facebook get into the mobile business in some way? Can you imagine them either coming up with an OS like Google or like Apple and Amazon actually producing devices?
Yeah.
So I think that's another way that they could monetize.
It's an interesting question. I mean, Majid, in your research, I mean, how practical would that be for Facebook?
I obviously am not privy to anything.
Sure.
I personally think that they would rather develop applications that run on somebody else's device rather than antagonize other people and try to compete with them. So all the set manufacturers and the operating systems. But I do think that they will focus on leveraging the state-of-the-art of mobile devices to be able to offer a good experience to their users, but to be able to monetize. As we said, mobile is still something to be figured out. I don't think anybody has totally figured it out yet, but it will be.
It certainly sounds like it's something that needs to be figured out
Correct.
fairly soon. Majid Abraham, thank you so much for joining me, and also to David Eastman for coming back.